So hey guys, welcome to another Warframe video, and today we're going to take a look at 3 secondary builds that rule them all. The idea behind these builds is that they are a great starting point, and at least one of these builds is going to fit and be effective on essentially any secondary weapon. All you have to do with these builds is take a look at your secondary weapon and determine whether it has high enough critical strike chance for the crit build, high enough status chance for the status build, or if it just has raw damage and will be best suited with the raw damage build. However, since these builds cover such a wide selection of secondary weapons, they are not specialized, and I would encourage you to tweak them based on your personal preference and based on strengths and weaknesses of individual weapons. So if you put one of these builds on a weapon but the reload time is unbearable for you, feel free to replace one of the mods with a reload mod. So without further ado, let's take a look at the first build, which is the status build. So we're going to start it off by adding Hornet Strike for more damage, Barrel Diffusion for multi-shot, Lethal Torrent for fire rate and multi-shot, and believe it or not, we actually have one free slot. Now, what you can put in there is up to you. You can put in something like Stunning Speed if you want more reload speed. You can put in something like Anemic Agility if you want faster fire rate, or if you want your weapon to do even more damage, you can throw in a damage mod as well. Now, since secondary weapons have access to more multi-shot than other weapon types, you don't have to throw in as many dual stat mods. And for example, with Staticore, which has 25% base status chance, you only need your multi-shot mods and 2 dual stat mods. And since this is not a shotgun, it's not a big deal if we don't reach 100% status chance. However, if you are using a secondary shotgun and you want to mod for status, you should still aim for 100% status chance. Now, since you don't have to use all 4 of the dual stat mods to reach decent status chance, you can use different setups with different elemental combos based on what you want the weapon to do. The one we're looking at right now is the one I like to call the Ragdoll Cannon, which has Jolt and Pistol Pestilence for corrosive damage, which will strip away enemy armor, and Deep Freeze with Heated Charge for blast damage, and this is where a lot of fun is gonna come from, but also a lot of crowd control. On config B, we have more of a damaging setup for the status build. So we have Jolt and Pistol Pestilence for corrosive damage once again, but we have Scorch and Heated Charge. So once you strip away the enemy armor, you're going to do a ton of damage to the enemy's flesh with the heat damage. And finally, we have Jolt and Scorch for radiation damage and Pathogen Rounds with Deep Freeze for viral damage. And this is the one I like to take versus very high level enemies. And the idea behind this setup is to confuse the enemies and make them fight each other with a radiation proc and at the same time cut their health in half with the viral proc. Personally, I am very picky when it comes to using status builds on secondary weapons. I only really use it with secondary weapons that have at least 15% status chance and do AoE damage. But that's just my personal preference, so you can try it on weapons that have at least 15% status chance and see if you like it or not. Now, if you really want to push it, you could use this build on a weapon that has 10% status chance, but personally for me that's far too low and the status procs are very unreliable. So let's move on to the second build, which is the crit build. So we're going to start off once again by adding Hornet Strike for damage, Barrel Diffusion for multi-shot, and Lethal Torrent for fire rate and multi-shot. Then we're going to add Pistol Gambit for critical strike chance and Target Cracker for critical damage. And we're going to top it off with 3 90% elemental mods, and for me most of the time it's going to be Convulsion and Pathogen Rounds for corrosive damage and Heated Charge for heat damage. However, if you're confident that you can land headshots and you know that you'll be aiming down sights most of the time, you can take out Heated Charge and replace it with Hydraulic Crosshairs, which is going to make the weapon far more reliable. Now, I know people are going to ask about Sharpened Bullets, but I simply do not like this mod. It's only 15% better than Target Cracker, and you can't swap it out for anything other than Target Cracker, because if you do so, you're gonna lose a ton of damage, and on top of that, if you stop aiming down sights, it's not gonna do anything. So I really don't like this mod, and I don't use it on any of my secondary weapons. Now, personally, I use this build on weapons that have at least 20% critical strike chance, but I'm more comfortable when the weapon has 25% critical strike chance. Especially if you don't have primed crit mods from Barakatir, because the standard crit mods for secondary weapons are kind of weak sauce. However, if you do get a crit headshot, it's gonna be a pretty nice number because the critical multiplier is gonna be amplified by the headshot multiplier, and thanks to that, overall, this scales much better than the raw damage build into endgame. And let's take a look at the final build, the raw damage build. So once again, we're going to start off by adding Hornet Strike for more damage, Barrel Diffusion for multi-shot, and Lethal Torrent for fire rate and multi-shot. Then we're going to add Magnum Force, and this is actually a pretty good mod, even though it reduces accuracy, because the accuracy loss isn't too high and the damage bonus is pretty nice. Then we're going to add 3 elemental mods, and for me, once again, most of the time is going to be convulsion and pathogen rounds for corrosive damage, and heated charge for heat damage. Now, as you can see, once again, we have an expel mod, and I know that a lot of people don't like these, but they do add a ton of damage to your weapon. But if you're fighting the corrupted, it's not gonna work, and maybe if you just don't like swapping out these mods every time you go against a new faction, you can take it out and put in a physical damage mod. This will do far less damage overall, but you don't have to constantly swap your expel mods every time you go up against a new faction, and it also works against the corrupted. This is the most reliable, but also the weakest build out of the 3, and it's not gonna scale as well as the other 2 builds into endgame. But that doesn't make it bad. Some secondary weapons just don't have the critical strike chance or the status chance, so they are best suited for this build. Now, the power of this build is dependent heavily on the weapon you use it on. If you, for example, use it on the Sonic Ore, as I'm doing right now, it is very good. If you, however, slap this build onto Leto, it might not be quite as effective. With most weapons, though, that don't have the critical strike chance for the crit build or the status chance for the status build, this is still gonna serve you very well throughout the entire solar system. And that's pretty much it for the video, so I hope it was helpful. I thank you very much for watching, as always, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.